Good evening, everybody. Thank you, BW, for inviting me. Well, it's a very interesting subject, first of all, emerging business. Actually, I would like you to go through some data which will, of the past, and you will get many aspects of what business is. What was the first 50 companies in the National Stock Exchange in 2008? What is the fate of the first 50 companies? You will see that 60% have gone under NCLT or under restructuring or have changed hands. Let us look at another figure. The amount of NCLT cases nearing 50,000, not a small number by any means. And let us look at the number of willful defaulters, 2,600 and more in the offing. So these are figures of the past, and that is why governance is a very, very important aspect. Not all of them perished because of governance. Some perished because of being hungry for growth, which was not supplemented by good governance. Others perished because of capital, and some of them over leveraged. So we have to take the past and look at what the future is for us. And for all emerging business, this is a learning curve, and to see what were the reasons of such failures. And if you look at all these failures, you can certainly be sure what path you are going to take. Business environment is not easy, it's competitive. Innovations are happening every day. Products are changing, and the market capabilities are also changing. So, for example, let us look something like even a small thing like a petrol bunk, which was very prosperous. In the next 5 years, how will you see that business model with number of EV vehicles coming high, and what will be the future of those bunks? Let us take that. So like that, if you can extrapolate each of the business and see what is the future, you will see a very radical change. Even if you look at power sector, you looked at first only thermal power, then we got into wind energy, then we have gone into solar, and now we are going into multiple nuclear, for example, is the latest that is coming in. So policies will keep on changing, and it will drive every business towards a new direction. And that is what emerging business will have to really look at all these changes. They must look at what is the future in the next 10 years. How are we going to take the next 10 years? It's very difficult to predict it, but certainly you can predict a 2-year or a 3-year vision, and then make a long-term vision out of it. And that is what is paramount in my view, and that is what is important. Now coming to governance. Governance has set rules, set standards, set practices, and I think we cannot deviate from them. So even if you look at Companies Act, we are multiply regulated. So everybody in emerging business can be in multiple different line of business, maybe even an SME or an MSME or even a small retail, but their line of business can be very different. So you will have some regulator or some compliance which will have to be always followed, and it is important that we keep the governance within the box that is we are supposed to have. For example, I see in emerging businesses, small businesses, compliance is a challenge. But today we have compliance tools which are not so expensive, which will be self-ticking. And I think that is the key. How are we going to adopt to the compliances? GST has been one of the challenges across the businesses. Being a practicing chartered accountant, I would say that GST has been one of the challenges for many. Compliance with the Companies Act is not too much of a challenge because everybody knows it, but GST being a new subject altogether has been a challenge for most of the people. So how do you do it? So there are many compliance tools which come across, and you can set yourself. So similarly, you look at the number of compliances or governance that are there. You will find there are 15, 16 type of governances or acts or statutes which will become applicable. For example, even the Shop and Establishment Act, you will have the Companies Act, then you will have the Labor Act. So you will have multiple ESI, PF. You look at this, so there will be huge level of, and any sort of non-compliance of anything, even TDS or even this thing can lead into multiple problems. And I think, so it is always correct and prudent to see that the compliances are done and they are become a very integral part of governance. Now, governance and compliance are intertwined in a major way, but it doesn't end here. Governance is also about planning. Governance is about also seeing that the right leverages come across. Governance is about understanding where is the capital coming from. Governance also looks at how are we going to plan our budget, and are we meeting our budget, and if there is a midterm correction that have to take place. So governance has multiple roles in my view, and it's a holistic approach that one has to have, and not a myopic approach. Governance means compliance. It's much more than compliance. It is about planning. It is about looking at the future, looking at how you are going to encounter the type of problems. For example, nobody anticipated, especially the MSMEs and SMEs, 30% of them went down when COVID came in, primarily because they did not know how to handle, and anybody could, it's natural. And even if you look at the number of restructurings that the Atmanirbhar's policy gave, the number of restructuring were about 40% of the industry got restructured. So, of course, it was an external help from the government. But what really happens is, sometimes you come across uncontrollable problems, and that is where it is very important to manage it. But controllable problems, what is the problem? Main problem is people are not able to manage the controllable problems, or the problems which we anticipate, which we know, and which we can envisage. So that problems have to be addressed. We have to look at the business model. What is the change in the environment? What is the policy change that is going to come? And how are we going to encounter those policy changes? This is what is, in my view, governance is a whole, there's a large perspective to this, and I think we need to keep in mind that this whole governance, principles of governance, especially in emerging business, because the capital is a constraint for emerging business, let me be very clear, and it's not easy to get equity nor get debt. So in the emerging business, there is no tolerance for error. There is very little tolerance for error, and that is why you see that in the emerging business, it perishes if there is a small wrong move. Even in emerging businesses, there are partners. There is partnership agreement or shareholders agreement. It should be very, very clearly defined. I see a lot of emerging businesses having problem because of lack of shareholder agreements. And I have seen multiple cases where, shareholder agreements and the role of all the equity holders and the promoters are not clearly defined. That is another thing that is in emerging business. The second thing which I see is the succession. In emerging business also, there is always the succession. whether it be a family succession or let it be a CEO succession or the managing director succession or the CFO succession. So this is another problem I find. There's a huge gap. How do we manage succession? How do we manage the next level? So I think it's very important for business leaders to understand the human resources that are available to them, what is the strength of the human resource. And I think in the mind of everybody, every entrepreneur has this intuitive thing that this type of people will leave my organization, and are we prepared for those type of replacements of such humans or such people. So this is going to be a very ongoing challenge which is going to be there. The number of attrition again is a big challenge. On one side we talk of jobs not being there, but if you look at the average retention of persons, especially look at pharma or some other industry, insurance, etc., the 33% at the first level of joining is what is the attrition there. So why are people leaving? Because they want more, and because their expectations, a gap between the entrepreneur and them is there. So here also there is a challenge. So managing human, apart from capital, governance, and all these combined together, emerging business must look at all these aspects. And that is why I mean to say succession within the family and succession within the top management. And that is the key to the emerging business. Another thing which I feel, and which I am very clear, especially in the manufacturing segment, if you look at the labor cost, and if you go through the labor index of the last 5 years, you will see that there's a steep rise in the labor index. And I think that's one thing which we should factor in as we grow, because the labor cost is going to grow up, and that is what is another challenge that I see in these businesses. So these are few of the challenges that I have posed. It's a great opportunity. We are well poised for a good growth. There are a lot of opportunities, especially in new gen businesses. And I think if there is a good governance, and if there is a foresight, and if there is a well-balanced thought process, and we anticipate problems, controllable problems, we know what it is, so every business can thrive. We have to measure the competition. We have to see what is the competitor, are we ahead of the competitor? So all these factors come into play, and all this can only come if you are very inside, you are very strong in terms of good governance, good ethics, good value systems, good compliance, and a foresight. So that's all from my side. Thank you so much, BW, for calling me over, and it's a privilege to be here. And thank you, Anurag and Devika, for calling me. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for taking out time from your schedule and gracing the occasion.
Sir, I know privately also you say this, and you said it on the... What about the cost of governance, or cost of compliance, or cost of policy evangelism? Give us a sense, because you yourself said that resources are limited, money counts, like both debt and equity are expensive. So give us a sense of, is there a percentage that you allocate towards mitigating this risk?
So compliance started with a 5% cost. If you look at 10 years ago, now compliance is at 10% on an average. So that is the cost of compliance. Why the cost of compliance has gone? Because people who do compliance are becoming more expensive, and because there is a lot of accountability associated with compliance, because they sign the the compliance certificate, so they are more expensive, and rightfully so. But how to sort of mitigate this is through various tools. For example, GST has a lot of tools, and which we can look at. So and also amongst the emerging businesses, can we have a sharing module where 3, 4, 5 companies, maybe not competitors, but distinct promoters can, or promoters or entrepreneurs can get together and share a model which can work for them. So can we do that? So I would say that suppose somebody is in a smaller place and wants to start business, can we create a center where we can share our resources? So sharing of our resources is going to be the key as we move forward to simply reduce the cost. And this is going to happen, let me tell you. And I'm seeing that happening across certain industries.
Sir, the other thing is DPDP. It has just come in. It became an act, though it was announced last year. It came. Now, data privacy is also going to change the nature of some of the businesses, and there will be an extra layer of resources and cost allocated to that. And the fines are very, very significant in this case, right? What is your comment on that?
So 2024 data privacy has come into play, and I think it's a huge compliance, and the compliance chain is right across the industry, because it's not a very isolated industry. You are reliant on some data comes from outside also, and some data is generated within. So what comes from outside has also to be secured, and what has to be secured is through very tight agreements of data privacy. So inherently one has to be very careful, but also ensure that whoever you are dealing with don't pass on the buck to you. So that is why, for example, an insurance company will have to have a very strong arrangement with the insurance agent. Similarly, should have a good arrangement with the hospital. Similarly, a hospital should have a very good arrangement with the vendor. So data privacy means if it is a chain of documents which go through, and it is important that agreements are tight so as to mitigate the risk of high fines. Because if I am compliant, and if I take pure data and I adhere to data privacy, I can overcome this problem. And it is important that we do it. See, for example, very simple example, masking of Aadhaar is a very important aspect. And I am in few boards where data comes in huge quantity. So I tell them, you must mask. And we get a report of that every data is masked, every Aadhaar card is masked. So I think we'll have to put principles behind it so that, you cannot absolutely eradicate a problem, but I think you can mitigate the problem and the liability with it.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions to Dr. Ravi?
If you have any further questions, simply raise your hands and we shall pass on a mic to you.
Hi. Like you mentioned about, about different policies. And I really liked one of your sentences when you said that governance is not about compliance, it is beyond that. It is a holistic approach. So I'd like to ask from somebody who's learning and somebody who would love to learn more, what particularly do you think is like the holistic part of it?
So holistic part, so one part is compliance anyway, and you agreed that it is a subset of governance. The second thing is compliance comes with returns, compliance comes with budget. So do we prepare a budget? Are we moving away from the budget? Are we paying our installments on time as far if there is a debt? Are we meeting the shareholders' conditions if there is a shareholder condition? So there are many aspects. It's not only that compliance, but the external compliance. How do you manage your stakeholders? How do you manage your labor? How do you manage the growth? And what do you see about the policy? Suppose there is a policy change, as Mr. Batra said, about data privacy. Can we close our eyes? We cannot. So we'll have to work towards, that closure of that. I'll give you one example. How many of the industries are protected towards insolvency? We are not. You know why? Suddenly you get a notice from NCLT that you have defaulted, and you're not prepared for it. So documentation is a very important aspect. Suppose I am on rent. I'm just giving an example, and there is a disagreement of rent. It can happen. And especially during COVID, what happened was when people were not there, so there was always this rentals were renegotiated. But somebody after 3 years goes and says, no, I want to have a compensation, and there is no documentation. It was just a verbal talk. It will not work. So I think documentation is going to be very important. So I'm just given an example of NCLT, for example. So we have to be hyper prepared for all these eventualities, and that's a must. And the management must think through, what are my problems, what are my compliances, what are my governance, and I think that is very important. So I would say be very active, take a list of things that you have to do, see what you have to do, what you can achieve, what is more expensive to achieve, so you can, and what can be achieved easily. I think very important to put a sheet and work out. And that's what I would say, because I run a firm with 300 odd people. So we have regulations from the institute, etc., etc. So we have to be very hyper clear and very hyperactive about what we have to comply. So, for example, I can't advertise. So somebody goes and puts a board somewhere. So I should be vigilant about it. So very, very clear. We have to be very clear about how we are going about it. And competitors will try to destroy you. Also, that is one more thing that you must be aware. So in competition, there are no rules. The rules are broken. So I think, how do you work on that? So it's a very holistic approach. Thank you for the question, ma'am.
Thank you for the answer.